At the will reading of Catherine Reed, her son Stephen smirked, until his father Frank stood with a second sealed envelope. The attorney's office was wood-paneled and quiet. Margaret Holmes read the will as Stephen leaned back, expecting victory. His smirk was a sharp, entitled thing, the look of a man certain the family business was his. Without a word, Frank Reed rose and placed a wax-sealed manila envelope on the desk. The room went cold. No one had expected the grieving widower to produce a second file. Stephen's smirk faltered. He stared at the envelope like it was a live grenade.
I asked Attorney Holmes to wait on this.
The envelope held Catherine's handwriting, a letter she'd filed 18 months before her death. What was inside would shatter Stephen's inheritance, but only if Frank had the will to follow through. To understand how that moment came to be, you have to go back 3 days. 3 days before the reading, Frank sat alone with Catherine's photograph.
You saw Stephen clearer than I ever did. You knew this day would come.
He went to her desk and found a manila envelope, his name in her handwriting. Inside, a letter dated 18 months ago. She had written it in secret, for him to read after her death. Frank, if you're reading this, my fears were justified. Stephen has become someone who feels owed everything. I watched him disregard the people who built this business. I won't let them be discarded. The letter revealed a legal condition filed with the will, a separate document, a letter of wishes.
She built a wall around the company to protect them from our own son.
He sat in the quiet for several minutes. Then he folded the letter and reached for the phone.
Margaret, it's Frank. I need to see you tomorrow. Catherine left something behind.
The next morning, Frank sat across from Margaret Holmes in the same wood-paneled office.
Catherine filed this letter of wishes 18 months ago. She wanted it held until after the will was read.
Margaret studied the handwritten conditions. The silence in the room thickened.
This is a condition precedent. Attached to the will, it has full legal force under Massachusetts law.
And if Stephen challenges it?
He can try, but a letter of wishes with clear instructions, properly witnessed, will hold.
She produced the original will and attached the letter as a binding codicil, then sealed it with wax.
This envelope is the wall Catherine built. It will either hold or crumble.
By the time Frank left, the second envelope was in Margaret's safe, waiting. The trap was set. All that remained was the reading. On the day of the reading, Stephen arrived 10 minutes late, tossing his car keys onto the receptionist's desk as if he already owned the building.
Let's get this over with. I have a meeting at 2.
He brushed past his father without a greeting and dropped into the chair across from Margaret.
He hasn't even looked at me, just like Catherine said he would.
Well, we're all here. Start reading.
It's traditional to wait until everyone is settled, Mr. Reed.
Frank nodded to Margaret. He was settled. He'd been ready for 2 days. Margaret opened the leather-bound folder and began reading the last will and testament of Catherine Ann Reed. The air in the room shifted. Stephen leaned forward, his fingers drumming on the armrest. This was the moment Catherine had prepared for, and Frank hadn't told a soul what he was about to do. Margaret's voice was steady as she listed the small bequests, watches, jewelry, modest sums for the grandchildren.
To my son Stephen, I bequeath the entirety of Reed Printing Company and all its operating assets.
The words hung in the air. Stephen inhaled sharply, and the smirk finally bloomed across his face.
Finally, the old man probably thought it would stay with him forever.
To my husband Frank, I leave our residential property and all its contents, free and clear.
Frank's face remained stone. He had known this part of the will. The house was never the battlefield.
Catherine, you gave him the company on paper so that your real condition could do the work unseen.
Margaret turned the final page. The formalities ended. Now the room held only the echo of what had been given.
Well, that's settled. The business was always meant to be mine.
He looked at Frank as if the war was over. Frank still hadn't moved. He would move soon enough. Before Stephen could stand to leave, Frank rose and produced a wax-sealed manila envelope from inside his jacket.
Margaret, I asked you to wait on this. It's Catherine's letter of wishes.
What are you talking about? The will has been read. This is over.
No, it isn't. Open it, Margaret.
Margaret broke the wax seal with a quiet crack that echoed through the silent office.
Wait, you can't just add something after the will is read? This is a joke, right?
A letter of wishes filed with the will is not an addition. It's a pre-existing legal instrument.
Your mother had her reasons. She made sure they would be heard.
Margaret unfolded the letter, the handwriting unmistakably Catherine's. The room held its breath. What she read next would shatter every expectation in that room.
I quote, "The transfer of Reed Printing Company to my son Stephen is contingent upon my husband Frank remaining employed as CEO with 51% voting authority until Frank chooses to retire."
The condition struck the room like a physical force, freezing every face.
That's no. She never said anything about that. This is a forgery.
Frank remained motionless, his hands resting on his thighs, as if the storm was passing elsewhere.
You can't enforce this. A piece of paper with a wax seal doesn't override the will.
It does, Stephen. This letter was filed as a condition precedent. It's legally binding.
She couldn't have. She was my mother. She wouldn't.
She saw what you were becoming. Read it again. Her words are clear.
The silence that followed was absolute. The company Stephen had already mentally owned was suddenly out of reach. Frank folded his arms. The second envelope had done its work.
This is absurd. I'll fight it. You can't keep me from what's mine with an old letter.
Under Massachusetts trust law, a letter of wishes is a recognized estate planning tool. It will hold.
I intend to enforce every word your mother wrote. You'll have to go through me.
You'll regret this, old man. I'll see you in court.
He snatched his jacket and stormed out, the door slamming behind him. The room exhaled. Only Frank and Margaret remained in the thick silence.
He'll try to break it, but Catherine knew the battle would come.
The letter is solid, Frank, but it will still be painful.
I know, but I won't let him destroy what we built, not without a fight.
That night, Frank sat alone by the window, the weight of the coming legal war pressing down on him. In the dim living room, Frank lifted the wedding photograph from the mantel. Him and Catherine, 40 years younger.
We built that company together. 40 years of early mornings and late nights.
He remembered her voice. The way she always said a business is just an agreement, but people are the foundation.
And our people deserve to keep their jobs, their dignity, not to be discarded by a son who sees them as line items.
He set the photo on the table and stared out at the empty street, hands clasped.
I'm about to lose my son for good. That's the price.
But Catherine had left him a weapon, and sitting on it wasn't an option.
She trusted me to act. I will.
The heaviness in his chest didn't vanish, but beneath it, a slow-burning resolve took hold.
I'll see this through, no matter what.
Stephen's challenge arrived 8 days later, a formal suit contesting the letter of wishes in Massachusetts probate court. On the hearing date, the wood-paneled courtroom was packed with expectation, Frank and Stephen on opposite sides.
My mother was isolated and coerced. That document is a manipulation of a dying woman's mind.
The letter was witnessed, notarized, and filed 18 months before death. Massachusetts law recognizes it without question.
He's rewriting history, painting his mother as confused so he can take what he feels owed.
The judge, a stern man in his 60s, listened without interruption, his pen moving in short, sharp strokes.
He's gambling that I'll crack under the weight, but I've waited years for this moment.
Arguments stretched across 2 days. Every employee Frank had protected became a silent witness in his mind. When the final gavel fell, the judge announced he would take the matter under advisement. No immediate ruling. The waiting began, and with it, the real possibility that a judge's interpretation could dismantle Catherine's last wish. 17 days later, the judge's ruling arrived. The courtroom was silent as he read the decision. The letter of wishes is a valid condition precedent. The transfer of Reed Printing Company is contingent upon Frank Reed's continued control.
That's a travesty. She was my mother, not his puppet.
Frank remained seated, his hands clasped. The years of worry settled into a quiet, grim satisfaction.
The court has spoken, Stephen. The company is yours only on the conditions Catherine set.
This isn't over. I'll find another way.
He still thinks he can bend the world to his will, but Catherine's wall is stronger than his anger.
The probate court's decree was final. The letter of wishes was now an unmovable part of Catherine's estate.
I didn't want this fight, but I will honor her wishes until my last day.
Stephen stared at his father, a storm of fury and disbelief. The legal war was lost, but the personal one had only begun. 2 days later, Stephen burst into Frank's office at the printing company, a typed letter in his hand.
I'm done. This is my resignation. You want the company so badly. Keep it.
He's bluffing. Thinks I'll beg him to stay. If that's what you want, Stephen, I accept it.
You can't be serious. This place will fall apart without me.
It didn't fall apart when your mother got sick. It didn't fall apart when you were too busy to help. It won't fall apart now.
You'll regret this, old man. I'll walk out and never look back.
He's already been gone for years. This is just the paperwork.
Stephen stormed out, leaving Frank alone with the hum of the presses and the full weight of the company squarely on his shoulders.
Catherine, I kept my word. Now the hard part really starts.
The next morning, Frank walked the printing floor. Every press was running, the rhythm of the shop unchanged. At the main offset press, Anthony Kemp was already at work, sleeves rolled up, ink staining his hands.
Anthony, walk with me. I need someone I can count on.
You've got me, Frank. We all know why you're still here.
Anthony had been shop foreman for 12 years. The crew trusted him more than they'd ever trusted Stephen.
Nobody's walking out. We're printing steady orders. Clients are staying.
They're staying because they believe in the name Reed, and because Catherine made sure I could protect them.
By the end of the month, the panic had settled. The shop was meeting quotas, and Frank was there before dawn every day.
I can do this, but I'm not 40 anymore. Someone else will have to carry this one day.
For now, the presses kept rolling, and Frank kept his promise to Catherine, one day at a time. 4 years can reshape a man. Frank's hair went fully white, his steps shorter, but his alarm clock still rang at 5.
73 years old, Catherine. I'm still here, still at that desk you built with me.
The business had stayed steady. Stephen never called. The distance between father and son calcified into silence.
I've outlasted my own son's spite, but I can't outlast time.
One evening, he sat by the window with a ledger and a notepad, the house too quiet around him.
Catherine's condition says I choose when to retire. She didn't say I have to hold on forever.
He began sketching numbers, company value, employee count, the name of the one person who had never asked for anything.
Anthony. He's the only one who would keep the promise. I've waited long enough. The company needs its future, not just its past.
The next morning, he placed a call to Margaret Holmes. He had a plan that would honor Catherine, and it would cost him everything. 2 days after his call to Margaret Holmes, Frank summoned Anthony Kemp into his office and shut the door, the latch clicking with finality.
Anthony, I'm 73. This company needs a future, and I've decided it should be yours.
Mine? Frank? I'm a foreman. I don't have the kind of money to buy a business.
$1. That's my price, $1, and one condition.
$1? Are you serious? He's not joking. The company's worth $500,000 at least, and he's offering it for pocket change.
The condition is that every single employee stays, no layoffs, no cuts. Catherine's people remain.
Anthony understood then. This wasn't a sale. It was a handoff of trust.
You run it your way, but the crew is non-negotiable. Every single one. Do we have a deal?
Deal. I'll keep the promise, Frank.
Margaret Holmes drew up the papers. Company stock transferred for $1, with an employment covenant protecting every worker.
Sign here, Anthony. One stroke, and Reed Printing becomes yours.
$1 and a handshake. He's trusting me with 40 years of sweat.
The pen moved, a date, a signature, and the company passed from one generation to the next, without a cent of profit for Frank. That afternoon, Frank gathered every worker on the shop floor. The presses stood still for the first time in years.
As of 1 hour ago, this company belongs to Anthony Kemp. His only condition, my only condition, is that none of you lose your place here.
Silence held for 3 heartbeats. Then a machinist in the back started clapping, and the room broke open.
I'm not here to change what works. We've built this together, and we'll keep building.
Frank stood at the edge of the crowd, hands in his pockets, and watched his people celebrate their own security. Reed Printing Company had a new owner. Not by blood, but by the only thing Catherine had ever demanded: loyalty. News of the sale reached Stephen through a terse letter from Margaret Holmes, summoning him to her office.
What do you mean the company was sold? To whom? For how much?
The company was transferred to Anthony Kemp for $1, with contractual provisions protecting all employees. Your inheritance is now limited to the liquidation of remaining real estate assets.
She slid a settlement statement across the desk. The figure at the bottom read, $190,000.
$190,000? I was supposed to inherit millions, a company worth $500,000, and this is what's left.
He stared at the check clipped to the statement, the number searing into him. The business he had treated as a birthright was gone.
This is theft. My father gave away my company for pocket change just to spite me.
It was his legal right under your mother's conditions. The sale was a valid exercise of his authority. There is nothing to contest.
Stephen crumpled the statement, his knuckles white. The fight was over, and he had lost by the measure he valued most. All that remained of Catherine Reed's legacy was a check and a bitterness he couldn't spend. Within 18 months, the shop Anthony Kemp had bought for $1 was turning away orders. The name Reed still meant quality.
We didn't just keep the crew. We hired 4 more people, 2 of them from Stephen's old network who walked out when he did.
Frank, now retired, visited the floor every other week, never to manage, only to see the hum of the machines and the faces of the people Catherine had loved.
She worried about discarding them. Now they're buying houses, sending kids to college. She'd be so proud.
I kept the promise, Frank. Not because of a contract, because you and Catherine gave me a reason to.
The crew still called it Reed's. Every employee who had been there on the day of the sale was still there, some training the new hires.
Our biggest client signed a renewal last week. They said they trust us because our people never change.
That trust is the real inheritance. It's what I gave up everything to protect.
The business Catherine had built, the people she had sheltered, were thriving. The letter of wishes had done its work, and in the corner of the shop, a small photograph of Catherine watched it all. Frank Reed died on a Tuesday morning at the age of 75, in the same house where he and Catherine had raised their son. He had no dramatic final words. He simply closed his eyes, and the machines that had hummed for 40 years seemed to pause with him. The funeral was modest, held under a gray New England sky. Anthony Kemp stood among the first row, his hands clasped tightly.
Frank wasn't just my boss. He was the man who looked at a shop foreman and saw someone worth trusting with a legacy.
Behind Anthony, 24 men and women from Reed Printing stood in a silent line, some wiping their eyes. Stephen was not among them. He arrived late when the crowd had thinned and stood at the edge of the plot for only a few minutes. On the coffin, someone had placed the framed photograph from Frank's mantle, him and Catherine, young and smiling. That same week, Anthony's wife gave birth to a son, a new life arriving as another passed.
One day I'll tell him who Frank Reed was, what he believed in, what he saved.
The stone on Frank's grave was simple. His name, his dates, and the words, "He kept the promise." 7 days after the funeral, in their modest living room, Anthony Kemp and his wife held their newborn son before a small circle of family.
We're naming him Frank. Frank Reed Kemp.
The middle name was not required by any legal document. It was a silent covenant between a father and his son.
I'll tell him about the man who changed my life with $1 and a handshake, and about the woman who saw the worth in everyone.
When the news reached Stephen in his sparse apartment, a casual mention from a former employee, he felt a stab he couldn't name.
Frank Kemp, they named a child after him. I'm still trying to forget.
He pulled the check stub from a drawer. $190,000. Never deposited.
It cost me everything and bought me nothing. Not even a handshake.
At the Kemp home, the baby slept in a wooden crib, one tiny hand curled around a worn photograph of Frank and Catherine Reed. The name Frank would echo in that house for generations. Reed Printing Company, under Anthony's hand, would echo for longer still. Frank Reed never sought applause. He stood up that day in a wood-paneled office not for himself, but for a promise he'd made to a woman who saw the future. Catherine's letter of wishes was more than a legal document. It was her voice reaching across 18 months to arm the man she loved against their own son's greed. They built Reed Printing on overtime and trust, and when those values were threatened, they defended them with ink and resolve. The company that almost fell to entitlement is now run by a man who clocks in with his crew, and every employee who stayed still has a job. A child named Frank is learning to walk in a house where his middle name is a daily reminder that character outlasts bloodline. The house where Frank spent his last mornings still stands, its mailbox bearing the name Reed, a silent sentinel of 40 years of marriage. Stephen's bitterness didn't disappear, but it no longer had power. The business he scorned now feeds families he never bothered to know. The presses still hum. The payroll still clears. And in the break room, next to the safety posters, there's a faded photograph of a silver-haired man and his wife, watching it all. The letter of wishes didn't just protect a company. It preserved a way of treating people, and that may be the only inheritance that truly matters. Frank and Catherine Reed. Their story didn't end with a fortune. It ended with a promise kept. In the Kemp home on a quiet Sunday, a small wooden shelf held two photographs, placed side by side with care. The first was a wedding portrait, Frank and Catherine Reed, young and laughing, on the day they promised forever. The second was a newborn, wrapped in cream, his tiny fist curled tight as if holding an invisible hand. Between them, a handwritten note in Anthony's block letters read, "For Frank, because they kept the promise." The baby, now a month old, would one day learn the full story behind his middle name, the factory, the dollar, the letter. But for now, he simply slept, unaware that his name carried 40 years of loyalty and sacrifice. Outside, the sun set over the house where Frank once sat by the window waiting for answers. Inside, the two photographs caught the last golden light, past and future, side by side. Frank Reed's story had ended, but in the Kemp home, his name was just beginning. Fade to black.